So let's paint this Trans Hyperion Alliance model. So from a Vallejo black primer, I lightly dust the model with Vallejo Model Air white mixed with thinner, roughly 1 to 2. Then I'll do 3 coats, giving a focal point from the top at an angle, and doing the same the opposite side, building up a strong white in the brightest areas. Next, I'll use thinned 1:1 Vallejo Model Air orange, but most thinned oranges will work. You can use Gryph-hound orange contrast too if you want. Now I'm just going to block him with thinned grey cere for the fatigues and leather bits. Finally, the last bit of blocking I'll use black, Chimera Carbon Black. And I'll do that on the visor, the rubber, the gun and the metal bits. Now we can use some contrast paints. For the leather I'm going to use Cygor Brown thinned with water. I think it's easier to control with water rather than the medium. Then I'm going to go in with thin Space Wolf's Grey contrast for the fatigues. Once that's dry, you want to thin the contrast paint 1:1 this time and use it like a glaze, drawing the paint into the shadows. Now I can start highlighting. I'm going to use Dark Reaper, Thunderhawk Blue, Rust Grey and Fenrisian Grey for the gun casing and the black rubber bits, being relatively rough with the first highlight of Dark Reaper. and a little bit neater with Thunderbolt blue. Now at the rust grey stage we can start the fatigues, focusing on the uppermost areas, leaving the space walls grey in the recesses, and the gun casing we can use tappy edge highlights to simulate chipping. Then for the Fenrisian grey on the black, I just like to add some spot highlights, but you don't have to do this, and also use the Fenrisian grey for the final highlight on the fatigues. So I wasn't happy with the contrast result. Painting on the fly is interesting, but I've learned that I don't like to use contrast paints with a brush. Too patchy, so I'll fix this. For the leather, I'm going to use Vallejo Model Air Burnt Umber thinned with water, but Ronoxide will work. Then I'm going to add Vallejo Model Colour Ivory to the Burnt Umber to create a mid-tone, and then use the tappy edge highlight method to simulate worn leather. You can be rough at this stage. Now I'll add more ivory to the mix, roughly 1:1, and do some sharper tappy highlights and scratches on the leather. Nice. Now that leather's sorted, I'll redo the fatigues. I'll start with a base coat of Vallejo German Panzer Grey, which is a primer, interestingly. Just take your time and be careful around the orange especially. To the German Panzer Grey, I'll add Vallejo Model Air Blue, roughly 1:1, and focus on the uppermost areas of the fabric. Now I'll add more blue. And apply this in the same fashion as the leather. On large areas like his arse here, use lines to create texture. Now for the metallic areas, I'll use Vallejo Metal Colour Series Gunmetal Grey. Be careful with this paint, despite being perfect, it's a very fluid consistency, so take your time. I'm now going to just do a quick highlight with Vallejo Metal Colour Series White Aluminium, just the odd edge and spot here and there where the light would catch. Time for the blue bits. However, I'll do the visor first and then the light sources last. For the visor, on top of the black undercoat, I'll mix some AK Ultramarine with black, leaving pure black in the bottom left corner. Then progressively add more Ultramarine till you get about halfway up the visor. Then add AK Ducat Blue until you get about 3/4 of the way up the visor. Then start adding AK Deep Sky Blue. There's no real exact recipe for this, so just experiment and have fun. This is my first time attempting this and I'm actually quite happy with it. For the stripe, I'll use Vallejo Model Air White Grey. I'll also shamelessly steal something I saw from Hyperion and do some overspill scratches on the shoulder pad. Handy if you can't get the stripe straight. Use that bit for battle damage. Then follow those scratches with the orange used earlier. Now if you've got any transfers, get them on before you start doing the battle damage. Mixing the orange and white grey from earlier, about 1 to 1, get a piece of sponge, and we can use this for sponge chipping. Making sure there's not tons of paint on the sponge. First go around the edges you can reach. Then switch to the brush to add more random scratches and chips. So I'm going to heavily water down burnt sienna ink and Doomball brown to create something similar to an oil wash to simulate dust and shit. Not actual shit. Just load it on the model, don't worry about making a mess at this point. Now the model's covered, I'll just take a damp brush and clean up where the paint is pulled. Try to clean your brush with each area you clean, trying to leave the wash in the recesses. Now it's dry, you could leave it there, but I'm not happy with it. So I'm going to use the same method with the brown wash, but this time using burnt sienna and Chimera carbon black. Now I'm going to go over the orange and metal bits. And again, I'll tidy up the overspill with a damp brush. So now the black is dry, we can add some lighting and throw a spot colour of blue in there. Starting with a slightly thinned ultramarine from earlier, I'll hit the light sources and the surrounding area. Then with a little Ducat blue added, we'll work up to a final spot of deep sky blue. Focus on the light source but not the surrounding area. And just to finish, I'm going to add a spot of white on that visor, just to give it a bit more of a reflective property. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Usual YouTube shit, like, comment, sub, all that. Let me know in the comments how you get on with this recipe.